record on this computer. All right. Okay, so I'm going to probably just shut my video off too. Okay. All right, so my name is Valdine Bjornson. I work at the University of Manitoba as a reading specialist, and I am going to just discuss a little bit about vocabulary, vocabulary related to typically, you know, language or words that are a little bit trickier to remember, let's say. So I'm going to just kind of do an overview. So technically, when we're learning new vocabulary, we want to kind of relate it to things that we already know, right? So we don't want to just remember words and just not have them connect with anything, because then it's just a word that's just stuck in our brain, hopefully. And then otherwise, it's harder to remember it, right? So if we don't have connections to words that we're learning, new vocabulary, then it's harder for us to remember them. I'm going to talk a little bit about the parts of words and how that will help. You know, we'll talk about vocabulary webs and how we can interrelate the vocabulary with various things that we know, or maybe different areas. Like if you're doing biology, if you're doing anthropology, if you're doing other kinds of, you know, content or courses, you can kind of see how they all kind of fit together in terms of their meaning parts, hopefully. And we're going to also talk about visuals for vocabulary, and then talk about how you can use flashcards to your advantage. There are some options if you have online access to textbooks. They do have, they sometimes do have, you know, those kinds of resources already in online textbooks, but certainly you can make your own in a very quick way if you know about Quizlet. And again, I'm going to just talk about how we can connect words, something like this interrelated within specialty areas, but you know, for broader topics as well. So I'm not sure if you've ever thought about words in this way, but you can see words in parts. So our basic words that kind of we use to talk to people with every day, not so much. But when you're talking about, you know, university kind of vocabulary, definitely they're usually on the longer side. And usually there's parts, like separate parts that have meanings. And so that can help us with learning new words. It helps us to remember it, because when we know those meaning parts, then we can kind of relate it to other words that we might know, or at least relate it to something that's maybe a bit more familiar than the new vocabulary that we're learning. Okay, so the whole idea of this analysis of word parts, you could call it perhaps word dissection. Even the most complex kinds of words can be understood, and I'll prove my point later on here. And then, you know, if you know, now I don't have the full list here, but there are, you know, common prefixes and suffixes. So if you know certain kinds of prefixes and suffixes, it gets to about, you know, 70, and I'm serious, like 70 to 85% of words are based on only about 10 to 15 common prefixes and suffixes. Unfortunately, those are the common ones. So the ones that we're really talking about are the ones that are really specific to certain kinds of courses, right? Course vocabulary. And it can help us with the complexity and understanding words, and help us with all kinds of things like literature, math, and science. So it's not just, you know, certain topics, but really broad, but very, very specific, right? Like you're really down the rabbit hole in terms of your study, right? So again, this is more general, but you know, the idea is that affixes are these parts of words, right? So there's beginning parts that, you know, if you think of the word like, but then compared to dislike, like there's a big change in meaning there, right? Endings, not so much, like the endings are not that great in terms of meaning, so not too helpful. It does help in some ways, and I'll show you some that might be more helpful than others. Again, if you know some basic parts of words, then it'll help you with the meaning. This is a list, and I'm not really going over this list, but it does tell us that, you know, if we're thinking of certain prefixes, some of them will be more handy than others, right? Like UN is actually 26% of words with prefixes will have the UN, right? Which is, I don't think, really helpful for us in this context, but it's just proving the point that there are some that are more common than others. This is kind of the prefix kind of zone I think we're in, right? In higher education and university, you've got certain kinds of prefixes that will be, you know, helpful for meaning. So if we don't know what hyperinflation means, but we know what hyper means, it means extreme, that's going to be extreme inflation, right? So if we don't know, let's think another one. Well, we know what malnutrition is, but let's say we don't know what malnutrition is. We know what nutrition is, but if we know mal means bad, we know that it's not very good, it's bad nutrition, right? So all of these things are very, very helpful. Again, I don't know, antidote, right? Or antithesis is anti means against. So if we know those kinds of things, it just pulls it all together for us. So obviously I'm not going to be, teaching every single prefix, but certainly what I'm suggesting is to look for those kinds of parts and words and see how they relate to the words that you are studying, and then break those words apart. So more, right? So neocolonialism or neo-impressionism. So that means new, right? So if you know those kinds of things, it doesn't become like, a word about like, polysyllable. Well, what in the world does that mean? But if I know what poly means, it means many, I can figure out what syllable is. And when I put those parts together, it's a lot easier to understand, right? Same with, tele, right? Telephone, we know, but if we know tele, as in telecommunication, it's distant communication, right? So hopefully, I'm convincing you in the sense of the words that you're trying to remember are not just like whole parts, they're pieces, right? And you can definitely relate them to other words. Like if you know what a superpower is, then you should be able to figure out what superimposition means, right? Because you know what super means, it means more than or above. So certainly you can relate those words, right? And that's another example of not just remembering words in isolation, but connecting them by their meaning parts in terms of, like this one is super, right? So related to superpower, we all know what superpower is, but do we know what superimposition is, right? So if you are in science, like specifically biology, medical areas like chemistry, science, prefixes, this is going to be helpful, right? So all of these come from super, I would say, very specific vocabulary. But if you know like words like, with these meaning parts, like endo means within, right? So intra means within as well. But if you know these kinds of parts, these are specifically going to be showing up in your biology textbooks. Again, pull these out. Like I said, I'm not going to go through each of the meaning parts, but certainly, these kinds of parts are there in the science area. So take a look at this and make sure that you're like, kind of pulling those parts out so that they make a lot more sense rather than just a whole word, right? So again, the endings of the suffixes, the endings are not that super helpful. It doesn't really help with meaning here, right? It's just basically changing the way you're using the word. So not that helpful, but there are some that are, again, really more advanced, right? So these science endings, right? The science suffixes, so itis, right? So that is meaning if you see, that ending at the end here, it means infection. So anything that has that itis at the end means some kind of infection, or pathy, right? At the end of it, it's meaning a condition, right? We probably know ology, which is like the various branches of science or study, right? Study of those branches of science. At the end, like biology, right? So all of these things at the end, again, have a distinct meaning, right? So centesis, it means surgical puncture. So, I don't know exactly, where you are in terms of your vocabulary that you're looking for, you're having to remember, but certainly, again, the endings and the beginnings of words can be helpful. It's like super helpful because you can relate it to many, many different words as well, right? Roots are the middle zone, right? The middle zone of the word. So these kinds of parts of the words are super helpful. So these definitely hold a lot of the meaning. So like if you think of acri, so acrid, acrimony, acridity, meaning bitter, right? We know what astronaut is, but can be related to astrophysics. Well, astrophysics is related to star. So it's physics, related to the studies of stars, right? We know what an automobile is. So what does that mean? Itself, I'm going to move the mobile kind of like the car, let's say, by myself, right? So you can relate that to autonomy, autocrat, automatic, right? So again, these parts here, these roots really do hold a ton of meaning, right? A dictator, right? Dictator is related to, dictate or diction, right? They're saying we're listening to them. We have to listen to them, let's say, or there's something to do with say, right? Or speak. Again, these are all pretty advanced vocabulary, right? Like multilingual, multiple, multifaceted. So multi, again, should be fairly easy. If you see multi in a word, then you can relate it to the concept of many, right? Same with micro. Microbiology, what does micro mean? It means small. Biology, the study of living things, right? So micro, right? So again, these types of meaning parts are super, super helpful. Like herbivore. What does vor mean? To eat greedily. Well, a herb is a herb, right? It's a plant. So vor is eating greedily. So eating plants greedily, basically, right? So that vor root is very, very helpful, right? Omnivore is like basically eating everything, right? Omni is overseeing, right? Okay, so definitely, hopefully, you can see that. Again, I'm just trying to prove the point here that here's more Latin roots. All of these are really very, very, very important for meaning, right? And so, all of these might be words that you come into contact with, right? So, I don't know, well, I don't know, mechanic, I don't know, let's see, think if we can find, yeah, so megabyte, megalopolis, megahertz, megaton, megastar, you might have that in various study. And what does mega mean? Well, probably we know what it means. It means big, right? So if you can think of that as, helpful in terms of these new words that you're learning, definitely it'll make it more efficient for you to remember them, right? Because you know what mega is. So you want to relate that to the idea of big, right? And again, more specific ones, right? So these combinations of phys, right? So that's nature, physics, physiology, metaphysics, all of those words are related to nature, right? Psych is related to the mind. Psychopath, psychology, psyche, psychic, psychiatry, all related to the mind. Pyro, related to fire, right? Therm, thermostat, thermometer, thermonuclear, those kinds of things related to heat. Okay, so again, very, very important in terms of trying to remember really kind of trickier language, right? Relating it to those parts. One of the things you can do if you are really, really focused on trying to remember certain kinds of vocabulary is create what we call a word matrix. So this might not be exactly, your particular area of study, but look at the MULT, many, right? So we can make that into multiples, we can make it into multiplicity, we can make it into multiplying, things like that, that are all related to the term malt, if that's, let's say that that's one of the words that you're looking at, but you're relating it to things that you know, right? And they're even going further and they're relating it to other words that relate to that. Obvious would be multinational, multiculturalism, multilingual, but then they're going into further word study here, which probably it might not be specifically relevant to you. You might not want to do, that really deep dive into some vocabulary, but certainly you can make something simple like that, where you have your words kind of interrelated, just in a nice, like quick, I guess, visual, right? Same here, you got divide and devise, but then you got a bunch of different words here. Well, let's see, individual, right? Individual is about separate, like it's one person, right? Individual. And indivisible or indivisibly is also dividing and separating, right? So super interesting in terms of, did we know that individual is related or connected to the concept of indivisibility or dividing, right? If we think about individual, it's related to divide. So that kind of thing is what I'm really suggesting. That whole idea of, understanding the core base of the words and then relating it to words that we know, and then these words get to be a lot easier for us to understand. So, proof in the pudding here. So arthritis. So let's take a look at this. Arth means joints, and remember, itis means inflammation, right? Bacteriostasis is bacteria is basically bacteria, right? And stasis means a slowing or stoppage, right? So bacteriostasis is the slowing down of bacterial growth. Dactylogram is, dactyl means digit or of a finger, and gram means written record. So this is a dactylogram is another name for fingerprint. Well, I'm not sure if we would use that, but I think fingerprint is easier. But certainly you might find this kind of language in some of your texts, right? Epi is upper or outer, and cardium refers to heart. So epicardium is the outer layer of the heart wall. You know, and then erythrocyte, erythro means red, cyte means cell. So it's a red blood cell. Okay, so super, super easy-ish when we are sort of looking at these different parts and making those meanings. But of course, better is to relate it, right? Relate it to words that you already know, right? So here, this whole idea of red blood cells, well, how is that related to erythrocyte, right? Erythro means red, right? Okay. All right. And then, you know, et cetera, we can go to, you know, electroencephalogram, right? Electro means having to do with electricity, encephal means brain, and gram means record. So together we have an electric brain record, or EEG, right? So that's pretty cool, breaking those word parts. It's super, super helpful. Oh, yes, I'm going there. So this is a word that you can literally dissect or look at the parts, and then you can come up with the meaning. So lungs is new, or P-E-N-U. So as in new, right, meaning lung. The next one is ultra, pneumono ultra, meaning extreme. Okay. Then we have microscopic. So that's meaning small. And then silico, meaning referring to silicon. We're getting there. Volcano, which refers to mineral particles that make up a volcano. Okay, we're almost done. Okay. Coni is a derivative known as conus, meaning dust. So that's here. Volcano coni, right? And then osis, which means affected with. So resulting from the inhalation of very fine silicate or quartz dust. I mean, that's a really ridiculous word. And you obviously hopefully don't have long words like that, but certainly we can break these words apart again and look at them and understand how in the world, first of all, were they created, because somebody decided to throw all those parts together, but it really does make sense, right? I'm not going to dare you to read that, but that is actually a word. Okay. Okay, so what we can do, and I guess we could quickly go there just to kind of, you know, prove my point that it's fairly easy. So I'm going to do, let's just switch over here. And again, I don't know if you'd necessarily need to do this in terms of, you know, let's just see if I can find one that's super easy for us to do. So you might do, and actually maybe I'll just do one of the ones that we had here because it's easier for us. Okay, so we could do that one that we just saw. And again, you know, you might not do this, but you might, because you know, you might find that this whole idea of visualizing it, but you don't have to obviously do this in terms of, you know, what you're studying, but you can certainly do this in terms of, you know, on a piece of paper, right? You don't have to make it this fancy. And then I'm just going to make just one more to show you how easy this is. Okay, so then let's do this one plus PLY plus ED. Okay, and we'll just see what happens here. Okay, so then it automatically makes this for you. It doesn't take that long. If you like it neat and tidy, I guess, you know, you can kind of do that. But otherwise, the whole idea is you're creating a visual of words that are tricky for you to remember, right? And you certainly can do that in a quick way, and a neat, really quick way, or you can just kind of create them with pen on paper, right? Another one you can do is analogies. So here we have this word, you know, phagocytosis, okay, a phagocytosis or phagocytosis. So, you know, phagocytosis, they're breaking it up and so you know what the pronunciation is. And this is phago, eating or devouring. Cyte is cell, and osis is the process or state. Okay, so there's three parts there. There's three meaning parts, right? And then if you look at these different parts, my definition is the process of cell eating, right? So, and then you have a picture. So this is really probably specifically for words that are really tricky, but it could also be just a great kind of way for you to flip through. If you're making flashcards, you can kind of, you know, have the word and the meaning parts and then a picture. Obviously you probably would have a definition here, but super, super helpful if you have those kinds of flashcards. Super helpful to remember, right? You can also go to etymology online. Sometimes, you know, I mean, I'll go there, but you know, let's actually do that word that we just saw, PH, and I'll maybe share my screen, I guess, here. So let's do that. So Okay, so it would be PH, I'll just try to see what happens here. PHAGO CYTOSIS. So let's see what it comes up with. So this is basically looking at these parts, right? So if I click on that, and this is what we call etymology online. So if you're interested, and then, you can go to the word and then you can click on, well, that comes from the, I guess, this pi root, BHAG, et cetera, et cetera. So it does get into a lot of history of it, but it means really to share, right? Share, eating, taking in, let's say, right? And then if we go back, we had that site part, which they're saying is about a cell, right? Which is what we talked about here. That's the meaning part of it, right? But then the cool thing is it gives you a bunch of different words like leukocyte, lymphocyte, phagocyte, whatever, right? So you've got these different kinds of connections automatically from that website. Okay, so that's etymology online, right? So it gives you the history of the word, but it also gives you connected words. It gives you the meaning parts of the words, those kinds of things. Vocabulary.com can be interesting too. So let's talk about psychology for a second. So this one, might be useful. It might not be, but you can look at it. It does have different words that they've pulled out that are based typically on the topic at hand. So we looked up, this is apparently under psychology. So a lot of these words will be related to perhaps things that you're studying in psychology, for example. So if we click on that, then it goes to the definition and it gives us examples and things like that. So vocabulary.com can be helpful, and you can test yourself and things like that. This I'm not going to go to because you actually have to pay for it, and it's I actually went there yesterday just to look at this PowerPoint, and it wouldn't open for me. But so it is a pay product, but a visual thesaurus. So basically you can make this on your own though. But the nice thing about this, if you do purchase this, is that it's automatically creating words that are related, right? So it does help in terms of, like, here social sciences, it has different words that are kind of related to it. Like that's the keyword, let's say, for example, and then it has different words that might be related to that keyword in the middle, right? So it is interesting because it does kind of help us again make that map, that word map, right? You can go completely low tech. This is just an example that I pulled up from Text Project, but stimulus, right? You can connect it to overstimulated, understimulated, unstimulated, and then you can go to stimulant, stimulate, stimulates, right? Economic stimulus, stimulus package, intellectual stimulation, sensory stimulation. So again, you've got the word, whatever that keyword is that you're trying to remember, but you're connecting it to things that are maybe familiar to you. So a little bit less, blingy than the other things that we were talking about, but certainly just as effective, just a basic concept map or, word family kind of map, right? Other strategies, Quizlet is obviously one that you can go to. I'll quickly go there just to show you. So what you can do here is, and I'm not going to go into like teaching the program here, but it is free, and you can, quickly make vocabulary words and then put in visuals that they have ready to go, and it's all free, and it's super easy to do. You just, add or remove, and you might have, a word here like, let's just put biology, just because it's easier for me to just come up with a word like that. And that's the study of life. And if I add an image, I can just throw in something that I think relates to biology, and then I'm done. And then it's going to show up in my flashcards, right? So here's my biology card right there. Okay, so super easy to use, and it can be very helpful because you have an automatic games platform if you want to. You can also go really wild, and you can have these words on a word wall somewhere in your space, wherever you do your studying, or where you sleep, in your bedroom, I don't know, but it's right there in front of you. So every time that you're waking up, or every time you're looking at something in your everyday space, you might organize it according to themes and topics and things like that, right? So certainly that can be done with sticky tabs on a wall. I showed you word mapping already, which is really, what that is, right? And then if you're really trying to drill down into some words that are trickier. You might have a journal. It might be something online. You have some kind of document that you add things to, but you might have something on your phone, or you might have a physical paper journal that you just add words in as you go. You can also do this whole idea of pictures, right? So that's what these images are showing here. This is in a classroom, but certainly the idea is, have a visual, like you could put this in a notebook, let's say, instead of just writing notes, you could try to make sort of a vocabulary map with images only, right? And you can draw it quickly or have certain things that relate to whatever the concept is, right? Besides that, these I would recommend Merriam-Webster online or the thesaurus.com. Those are really good because they're they're solid websites, but they kind of easy to use. Like, okay, what is this word? Just go to it, getting the definition. They might have an example of how to use it. But certainly those two websites are pretty good for solid definitions. And then this is one that you could do like a vocabulary self-collection strategy. So typically this is done with partners, let's say with maybe a study group. But you're going to go through a chapter and you're going to choose words. And you're going to decide, okay, why are we choosing these particular words? So you each kind of choose your own. Let's say you each choose, I don't know, 10 or 15 or whatever, maybe more, I don't know. But you kind of set it so that there's only a few that you choose. And then you're going to decide, okay, why did you choose your words? Okay, I think I'm going to incorporate that word. That's a good idea. I didn't when I went through it myself, but you added it. So I'm going to add that one too. You think it's important? Okay. So you kind of come up with this collective list of what's important, maybe what's difficult to remember, what you think is really important, maybe for the exam or your study. So you kind of are working with somebody and they kind of comb through the chapter and you kind of comb through the chapter and then decide which words are relevant or important. But then you start talking about these words and then deciding, okay, well, I think that's difficult because, oh, I never really thought about it. So it's really about very specific conversations about vocabulary, right? And you could then start making it personal. The person that you're maybe working with can say, well, that word to me sounds like this, and it relates it to me to that way. And you can explain your own, connection with it. So what you're doing really is studying, but you're really, really condensed studying. So you're really focusing on certain things, right? And you're also just, having a very good conversation about things and really focused on something very narrow. But of course, you're going to get broader as you talk about it, right? Okay, so that's about it. And otherwise, I'm sure that some of you will know that we have campus tutors with the accessibility services. We have workshops. We have, of course, writing tutors. Accessibility services also have, writing tutors. And then the academic learning tutors, I guess more is what I'm referring to. The Academic Learning Center has academic learning tutors as well. Okay, so there are some other options for you. And again, my name is Valdine Bjornson. And if you need to contact me, then please send me an email and I would love to hear from you. Thank you.